Hey, how's it going, guys? Stolen here with Raised by Sharks. Today we're going to be bringing you a video on the top 5 monsters most likely to be in Monster Hunter World soon. So obviously there's a bunch of monsters that we think could potentially make the list eventually, but these are monsters that we think will be in here sooner than later. And we think this because of the fact that with certain monsters on the list, there's reasons how they incorporate into each other, so it makes sense for them to do it early because it lets them bring monsters in quickly using the same skeleton. So before we get into the list, I just wanted to mention the fact that there's a monster recently announced to not be in Monster Hunter World, and it was originally designed to be in the full game. It was axed and will most likely not be seen as DLC because apparently Lagiacrus, yes, Lagiacrus, I know it's a monster we all wanted in there because his design was incredible, his weapons were really cool, his armor looked awesome, and we need that electric stuff. So, I mean, we all wanted to see him in here, but sadly, the developers said that when they were trying to make him for the full game, they couldn't get his skeleton to work properly. There's some brief footage of him in the original footage of the game and stuff like that, but they couldn't get his skeleton to behave. His head apparently behaved very similar to the Wiggler helmet because it just would flop around too much, and they couldn't iron it out, so they axed him from the full game, and we probably will not be seeing him anytime soon. Now, we could see him potentially in some sort of G-Rank DLC expansion that you would have to pay for, but if they were having this much trouble with him that they had to axe him from the full game, I can't see them doing that much work to put him in for free. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the list. The first monster that we think is most likely to be seen in Monster Hunter World very soon is Plesioth. Plesioth's skeleton is already in the game between Giratodos and Lavasioth, so it'd be easy for them to implement him in. It's basically just a skin transfer and working on a new AI and attack move, so it saves a whole step from them having to create a whole skeleton, which is supposed to be the harder part to creating a monster. Also, there's this entire unused beach section of the ancient forest, so if they were to use that for his whole water-based combat section and then incorporate some land-based combat like they do with Lavasioth, or a hybrid type deal what they do with Giratodos, and put him in like a muddy or like a little lake area to it and open it up a little bit, they could easily have Plesioth be in the game combat-wise, lore-wise, easily implemented. And on top of that, if you look into the weapon trees, and for most of them, it's just a generic water tree. I mean, we don't even have any really strong weapons that are for water base. You rarely see them in endgame builds. So this could be a situation where they could potentially add some high level water stuff to the game, and that would be really good for the endgame, add a little bit more variety. A lot of people like the design of some of his armor, especially for the female side, so that's why we think that he'll make the cut. So monsters 2, 3, and 4 all tie into each other, and they're part of each other's reason why we think that they're on this list. Those monsters are tigrex, nargacuga, and barioth. All of those monsters are fan favorites, they all share the same skeleton, have similar AI and fighting mechanics. Each of those monsters has a specific map they would slot into. Nargacuga in the Ancient Forest, Tigrex in the Wildspire Waste, and Barioth at the Coral Highlands. Also, each of those monsters wouldn't look totally out of place if they were in a different map for an event quest or investigation. Bringing those monsters in would add to the endgame weapon builds, high sharpness and affinity weapons from Nargacuga, high raw low affinity similar to Diablo's weapons from Tigrex, and potentially high damage, high ice damage weapons from Barioth. Also, it adds the potential of adding 3 new armor sets, all with great designs that the fans have loved in the past. So those monsters would be easy to add, they could work on all of them at the same time, it brings a lot of endgame variety to the weapon builds and to the armor builds, as well as making the fans happy by bringing in a lot of their favorites. I think Capcom is starting to realize that they captured the Western audience with the Monster Hunter World release, and to keep that Western audience, they need to add a few things to the endgame. Those things are variety, content, and challenge. They've gotten the challenge part. We could see that they're listening with the Tempered Deviljho event. They could see that the community loved it, so I could see them adding stuff later on that involves the challenge. Also, I think they're starting to understand how hungry the new players are for content. The more content they add, the more dedicated their fan base will become, and the more dedicated their fan base is at promoting their own game through word of mouth. They're going to add in new monsters, and I think they're going to do it at a faster pace now that they've understood this, because if they really want to push for a DLC or a new Monster Hunter game, they really want the fans on their side, and so far they are, but they're going to fight to keep it that way, so that way when they make their next release, it does just as well, if not better, than Monster Hunter World. So some people might see my number 5 monster on this list as being a bit of a cop-out because it's not a specific monster, but in general a brand new monster. I think that they'll use one of those amazing unused designs, or maybe even take a very popular, no longer N tier monster from Monster Hunter Frontier and bring it into the forefront with Monster Hunter World. The developers that designed the monsters for Monster Hunter World are amazing at their job and are talented artists. There are a lot of monster designs that we've yet to see in the mainstream series, and we would love to see some of them, and I think they're starting to understand that to keep the Western audience, again, they need new content, not just rehashed content. When it comes to selling that next DLC, fans coming back to the series seeing that Capcom has put in the effort for them are way more likely to buy the game or the next DLC that they put out. So putting out a new monster makes sense. You can't just put out 6 old monsters in a row and expect the fan base to be happy about it even though it's free DLC. Even just a quick Google search of unused monster concepts for Monster Hunter, you'll see some stuff that'll blow your mind. Now I know originally I said only 5 monsters, but because I did a bit of a cop-out, I'm going to give 2 more monsters that could potentially be coming fairly soon. Lunastra has the same skeleton as Teostra and was part of the leaked list that potentially could be coming as a DLC to Monster Hunter World. Now, nobody knows for sure if the leak was true, obviously, but it makes sense because it would be very easy for her to be implemented, and it's another endgame Elder Dragon for those tier 3 temper farming. Lastly is Alatreon. Alatreon is one of the fanbase's most loved endgame Elder Dragons. Alatreon wielded all of the elements, which means that his weapons could potentially use any of the elements, which would be amazing for the elemental build endgame, because as of right now, it's mostly just elementless weapons. So it would be amazing to see what Alatreon's stuff could do to the endgame meta, as well as they could add a massive challenge through Alatreon, which we all saw through the Temper Devil Joe the community loved. That's all we have for the monsters potentially coming to Monster Hunter World soon. Let us know in the comments what you think about this list, what monsters you think should be on the list or shouldn't, and also let us know from this list what monsters you love or what monsters not coming to Monster Hunter World you'll miss the most. Thank you for watching Raised by Sharks. If you like what you saw, please leave a like and subscribe.